The summer heat in Reno, Nevada hit differently on a Saturday afternoon. The kind of dry heat that made the asphalt shimmer and turned car interiors into ovens within minutes. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the last table at Murphy's Diner, her lower back aching from the double shift she'd just pulled. Her blonde hair, tied back in a messy ponytail, had strands falling loose around her face. At 32, she looked tired but not defeated. There was something in her green eyes that suggested she'd been through worse and survived. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from her daughter, Emma. "Mom, don't forget about Aunt Lisa's wedding tomorrow. She said we have to come. Please?" Sarah sighed. Lisa wasn't really her aunt, more like a distant cousin she'd grown up with before their lives took drastically different paths. Lisa had married into money, divorced with an even bigger settlement, and was now marrying some tech executive in Lake Tahoe. Meanwhile, Sarah was raising an 8-year-old daughter alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She hadn't wanted to go. Weddings were expensive, even as a guest. The dress she'd have to wear, the gift she couldn't really afford, the gas money to drive 3 hours to Lake Tahoe and back. But Emma had been so excited when the invitation arrived, decorated with gold foil and embossed lettering that screamed wealth. "I'll be there, sweetheart. We'll leave early tomorrow morning." The next morning, Sarah pulled her 15-year-old Honda Civic into the parking lot of the Edgewood Tahoe Resort. The lake stretched out behind the venue, impossibly blue against the Sierra Nevada mountains. Luxury cars filled the lot. Mercedes, Teslas, BMWs. Her Civic, with its faded paint and duct-taped side mirror, looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. Emma pressed her face against the window, eyes wide. She wore a simple lavender dress Sarah had found at Goodwill and spent an evening altering to fit perfectly. Sarah herself wore a black cocktail dress she'd owned for 6 years, the nicest thing in her closet. "So pretty, Mom." Sarah forced a smile. "It is, baby. Come on." The ceremony area was set up on a lawn overlooking the lake. White chairs in perfect rows, an arch draped in cream roses and eucalyptus, a string quartet playing softly. Guests mingled in clusters, the women in designer dresses and the men in suits that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. She found 2 seats near the back, hoping to blend in. Emma sat next to her, swinging her legs and watching everything with wonder. Sarah recognized a few faces from childhood, but most people here were strangers. Lisa's new social circle. Tech executives, investors, people who vacationed in Tuscany and talked about their summer homes. The ceremony was beautiful and brief. Lisa looked stunning in a Vera Wang gown, her new husband Daniel beaming beside her. Sarah clapped along with everyone else, feeling increasingly out of place. This wasn't her world. It had never been her world. The reception was held inside the resort's ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the lake view. Round tables with silk linens, centerpieces of white orchids, menu cards with calligraphy. Sarah checked the seating chart and found their names at table 16, tucked in the far corner near the kitchen doors. She wasn't surprised. At their table sat other peripheral guests. An elderly couple who turned out to be Daniel's former neighbors, a work colleague who'd brought his teenage son, and 3 women Sarah didn't recognize. Everyone made polite small talk. Emma colored on the kids' activity sheet the venue had provided, oblivious to the social dynamics playing out around her. The first course arrived, some kind of soup with a swirl of cream and herbs Sarah couldn't identify. It was delicious. She ate slowly, trying to make it last, knowing Emma would be hungry again in an hour and they couldn't afford the resort's restaurant prices. Then Lisa made her rounds, working the room with Daniel at her side. When she reached table 16, her smile was bright but brittle. "Sarah, I'm so glad you could make it." She air-kissed near Sarah's cheeks without actually making contact. "And this must be Emma. My goodness, you've grown." Emma smiled shyly. "Thank you for inviting us." Of course, of course." Lisa's gaze swept over Sarah's dress, lingering just long enough to catalog its age and modest price point. "You're still waitressing, then?" The question landed like a stone. Sarah felt heat creep up her neck. "Yes. At Murphy's Diner in Reno. Pays the bills." How wonderful that you're managing. Lisa's tone dripped with condescension disguised as concern. It must be so hard, doing it all on your own. Such a brave choice you made. It wasn't a choice, Sarah thought but didn't say. Emma's father had left when she was 2 months old, leaving nothing but debt and broken promises. But she wasn't going to explain her life to Lisa in the middle of a wedding reception. We're doing fine, Sarah said evenly. Lisa moved on to the next table, but her words lingered like smoke. Sarah felt the weight of eyes on her, the subtle shift in how the other guests at table 16 now looked at her. The elderly woman offered a sympathetic smile that somehow made it worse. The main course arrived. Filet mignon with roasted vegetables and some kind of red wine reduction. Sarah cut Emma's meat into smaller pieces, her hands steady despite the knot in her stomach. Around the ballroom, laughter and conversation flowed freely. Champagne glasses clinked. A toast was made. Then Daniel's mother, Victoria, took the microphone. She was a severe-looking woman in her 60s, wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country. Her speech started warmly enough, welcoming everyone, praising her son's choice in bride. But then her gaze swept the room and landed, unfortunately, on Sarah's table. We're so blessed to be surrounded by such accomplished friends and family today, Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. People who have built successful careers, contributed to their communities, achieved real excellence in their fields. She paused, and Sarah felt it coming like a wave about to crash. Of course, we welcome everyone here, regardless of their station in life. Even those still finding their way. She smiled, but it was cold. After all, someone has to serve the coffee, don't they? A few people laughed. Not many, but enough. Sarah's face burned. Emma looked up at her, confused by the sudden tension she could feel but not quite understand. Mom? What does she mean? Nothing, sweetheart. Eat your dinner. But Victoria wasn't done. She'd had too much champagne and too little filter. Daniel tried to gently take the microphone from her, but she waved him away. I just think it's important on a day like this to appreciate what we have. The education, the opportunities, the social connections that open doors. Some people understand the value of ambition. Others are content with simpler lives. Her eyes were directly on Sarah now. The entire ballroom had followed her gaze. Sarah felt like she was pinned to her chair, displayed for everyone's judgment. The waitress, the single mother, the poor relation who'd been invited out of obligation. Emma's hand found hers under the table, squeezing tight. A man at a nearby table, someone Sarah didn't recognize, leaned over to his companion and said in a voice just loud enough to carry, "She's just a waitress." What did Lisa expect, inviting people? The words cut deeper than Victoria's speech. Sarah's vision blurred slightly. She'd faced poverty, exhaustion, loneliness, and the constant grind of making ends meet. But this public humiliation, in front of her daughter, in a room full of strangers who looked at her like she was less than human because of her job. This was different. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Sarah grabbed her purse, taking Emma's hand. She wasn't going to sit there and endure another second of this humiliation. Emma looked up at her with worried eyes but followed without question. They wove through the tables toward the exit, Sarah's heels clicking against the polished floor. The conversations around them had dropped to whispers. They made it to the lobby, then outside to the parking lot. The mountain air felt sharp and clean after the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. Sarah fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking now that she was away from all those judging eyes. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. We're just going to head home a little early." That's when she heard it. The unmistakable rumble of motorcycles. Deep, throaty engines that echoed off the resort buildings. Sarah looked up to see a convoy of bikes rolling into the parking lot. 5, 10, 15 of them. Harleys, mostly. Chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. The Hells Angels patch was clearly visible on their leather vests. Sarah froze. This was supposed to be a high-society wedding at an exclusive resort. What were they doing here? The lead rider pulled up near the entrance, killed his engine, and removed his helmet. He was a big man, probably in his 50s, with a salt and pepper beard and arms covered in tattoos. Then he saw her. His weathered face broke into a huge grin. "Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? What the hell are you doing here?" Sarah blinked, recognition flooding through her. Diesel. They called him Diesel, though his real name was Marcus. She'd met him 2 years ago when she'd started her second job, the one she only worked Thursday through Sunday nights. The job she'd never told anyone about, not even Lisa. Marcus strode over, his boots heavy on the pavement. The other riders had dismounted now, all watching. Behind them, resort guests were beginning to emerge from the building, drawn by the sound of the motorcycles. Sarah could see Victoria's horrified face in the crowd, Lisa clutching Daniel's arm. "We didn't know you'd be here," Marcus said, pulling Sarah into a brief hug. "Daniel invited us. Said his bride wanted the best damn food at this wedding, and that meant bringing in outside catering for the late-night portion." He gestured to the other riders. "Brought the whole crew to help set up." Emma tugged on Sarah's dress. "Mom, who are these people?" Marcus crouched down to Emma's level, his fierce appearance softening. "And who's this beautiful young lady?" "This is my daughter, Emma," Sarah said quietly. "Well, Emma, your mama is the best chef in Nevada. Maybe the whole damn West Coast." The words hung in the air. Several wedding guests had gathered closer now, curiosity overcoming their initial alarm. Sarah saw Lisa's face, confusion written all over it. If you made it this far and you're rooting for Sarah like we are, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. Marcus stood up, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Yeah, Sarah here runs the kitchen at our clubhouse every Thursday through Sunday night. Best barbecue, best comfort food, best everything this side of the Rockies. We tried to get her to quit that diner job and work for us full-time, but she's loyal to Murphy." More guests had gathered now, including Victoria, who looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Daniel pushed through the crowd, his face lighting up with recognition. "Wait, you're Sarah Mitchell? The Sarah Mitchell?" He turned to Lisa. "Babe, this is the chef I've been telling you about. The one the Reno chapter raves about. I've been trying to book her for months." Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She'd kept her weekend job quiet, not out of shame, but because it was her world. The clubhouse kitchen was where she could experiment, create, cook food that made hard men weep with nostalgia. It paid 3 times what the diner did, cash under the table, and the angels treated her like royalty. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. "Look at this. Last month's anniversary party. Sarah made a brisket that had grown men fighting over seconds. And these ribs?" He showed the screen to the gathered crowd. "Smoked for 14 hours. Her peach cobbler sold out in 20 minutes at our charity fundraiser." One of the other riders, a woman with short gray hair and knowing eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Carolyn, VP of the Reno chapter's old ladies. Sarah doesn't just cook for us. She taught my daughter to make her grandmother's recipes before my mom passed. Sat with families during hard times. Fed people who had nothing." The narrative Sarah had walked into this wedding with was crumbling. She wasn't just a waitress scraping by. She was a chef, respected and valued by people who lived by their own code of loyalty. Victoria tried to recover. "Well, I'm sure it's very nice that you cook for these people. But surely you can't compare a biker club kitchen to real culinary." Marcus cut her off with a laugh that had no humor in it. "Lady, Sarah turned down a job offer from Guy Fieri last year. Said she couldn't leave her regulars at the diner or her family at the clubhouse. You know what real culinary skill is? It's cooking food that makes people remember why they're alive." Daniel was staring at Sarah with something like awe. "The late-night menu I requested. The pulled pork sliders, the mac and cheese, the jalapeno cornbread. That's all you?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I didn't know you were Lisa's groom. You just called yourself Dan when you contacted the clubhouse." Lisa's face had gone pale. She looked between Sarah and Daniel, finally understanding that she'd humiliated someone her new husband had specifically sought out and respected. Daniel turned to face the crowd, his expression hardening as he looked at his mother. "Mom, did you really just insult the woman I hired to cater the most important part of our reception?" Victoria sputtered. I didn't know she was. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a waitress and assumed that was all she was. Daniel's voice carried authority now, the same tone he probably used in boardrooms. Sarah is one of the most talented chefs in the state. The angels don't trust just anyone with their kitchen. Marcus crossed his arms, his crew forming a semicircle behind Sarah like a protective wall. We've had trained chefs from culinary schools try to cook for us. They didn't last a week. Sarah walked in 2 years ago, no fancy degree, just heart and skill. She earned every bit of respect we give her. Emma squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, and Sarah squeezed back. For the first time since arriving at this wedding, she stood taller. These men and women, covered in leather and tattoos, had seen her value when people in designer clothes couldn't. Lisa finally found her voice. Sarah, I had no idea. I'm so sorry for what my mother-in-law said, for what I implied earlier. Sarah met her cousin's eyes steadily. You never asked, Lisa. In 15 years, you never once asked what I was really doing with my life. You saw a single mom working at a diner and decided you knew my whole story. The elderly woman from table 16 had made her way over. She touched Sarah's arm gently. I worked as a maid for 30 years. Put 3 kids through college doing it. Never let anyone make you feel small for honest work, dear. One of the younger angels, a guy they called Wrench, grinned. So are we still setting up the pit or what? Because I drove 3 hours hauling a smoker, and I'm not leaving without feeding these people proper food. Daniel laughed, the tension finally breaking. Yes, absolutely yes. He looked at Sarah. If you're still willing to do this after everything? Sarah glanced down at Emma, who was looking up at her with pure pride shining in her eyes. Then she looked at Marcus and the crew, her chosen family. Finally, she turned back to Daniel. I'm a professional. I don't bail on a job because of hurt feelings. But we're doing this my way. Your guests are going to eat real food, served by people who know its value. And Emma gets to help. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. Marcus clapped his hands together. All right, people. Let's show these fancy folks what real cooking looks like. Sarah, what do you need? Sarah pulled her hair back tighter, her exhaustion from the double shift forgotten. Kitchen access, 3 hours, and everyone out of my way. 18 months later, Sarah stood in her own kitchen. Not the cramped apartment above the laundromat, but a real commercial kitchen with stainless steel counters, professional-grade ovens, and enough space to breathe. The sign outside read Sarah's Smokehouse in bold letters, with a smaller line underneath, where everyone eats like family. Emma sat at the counter doing homework, now 9 years old and occasionally helping with food prep on weekends. The lunch rush had just ended, and the restaurant was full of regulars. Bikers sat next to business people. Families with kids shared tables with solo diners. The mac and cheese that had become legendary at the clubhouse was now the most ordered item on the menu. Marcus walked in through the back door, carrying a box of fresh peaches from his sister's farm. Your cobbler crowd is already forming outside. You're going to need to make 3 pans today. Sarah laughed, wiping flour from her hands. You're a bad influence. You know that? The best kind. He set the peaches down and grabbed a cup of coffee. Got something for you. He pulled out an envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local chef turns down reality show to stay true to her roots." The article featured an interview where Sarah had politely declined an offer to compete on a major cooking competition show. They wanted me to play up the struggling single mom angle, Sarah had told the reporter. Make it dramatic. But that's not who I am anymore. I'm just someone who loves to cook for people who appreciate it. The article mentioned the wedding, of course. How a moment of public humiliation had turned into a revelation. How Daniel and Lisa had become regular customers and friends. How Victoria had privately apologized months later, and now volunteered at the community kitchen Sarah ran every Tuesday, feeding homeless families. Emma looked up from her math homework. Mom, Mrs. Peterson wants to know if we can cater her daughter's graduation party. Sarah smiled. Tell her yes, and that will make it special. The door chimed. More customers. Sarah recognized some faces, welcomed new ones. This was her place. Built on hard work, loyalty, and the refusal to let anyone define her worth by their limited vision. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. Bringing the book club by tonight. 20 orders of ribs. You're gonna make us all fat and happy. Sarah typed back. That's the plan. She looked around her restaurant, at Emma thriving, at the community she'd built, at the life she'd created on her own terms. That wedding had been a turning point, but not because anyone had rescued her. She'd rescued herself, with help from people who'd always seen her clearly. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. If it touched your heart, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you felt. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next incredible story. And hey, suggest themes for upcoming videos. Your support means everything. See you in the next one.